Hello and welcome back to part 6 of Asteroids. So in the last video, we went through how to get the asteroid to move around the screen. Okay, so in this video, we're going to do a lot more about how to get more asteroids on the screen and how we spawn them all. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about array lists. So, an array is a new type of variable. An array is a collection of objects that's in a fixed list. So if I want to do if I want to have an array, I can have a collection of whatever I want, but an array has to be a fixed size. Whereas there's this thing called an array list, and you can look this up more on the reference page or online with Java. An array list is a collection of objects that is not a fixed size. So it changes in size depending on how many objects are in it. So that's what we're going to do this time. So instead of having our test asteroid, we're going to get rid of that real quick, and we are going to make an array list of asteroids. So what we are going to do is we're going to call this an array list, and then you have to put the type of objects you're going to be putting in your array list. So that is the class of objects you're going to have. So we're going to put asteroid in for our objects, and we're going to call this list asteroids. So this is going to be a collection of all the asteroids in the game. Then what we're going to do is we are going to make a random number of asteroids. So instead of making a new asteroid for test asteroid, what we're going to do is we are going to set up a loop. So we're going to say for int I is equal to 0. So we're going to start this index number at 0, and then we're going to loop until we get to an integer. So floor, just so you know, I'll explain this real quick. So we'll do floor, open parentheses, random, open parentheses, and then we're going to go from 6 to 9, or let's do 6 to 10. This is going to be 6 to 10 asteroids. And basically what this is doing is this is random, gives you a float. So it's a floating point. So it's like 5.6. You know, it's got a decimal, but we don't want a decimal for an index number. We want the actual integer number. So floor grabs the lower. So like if it's 5.6, it'll bump that down to 4. Or yeah, 4.6 goes to 4. Yeah. Or 5.2 goes to 5. So it just cuts off the decimal, right? So it's going to iterate from 0 to 6 to 10, depending on what gets chosen. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do I plus plus. And this is also something that I don't know if you've seen or not. We talked about plus equals. Plus plus means add 1. So we could also write this as I equals I plus 1. Or we could write this as I plus equals 1. Or we can write it as I plus plus. They all do the same thing. So then what we're going to do is we're going to say asteroids, which is our list, our array list. And I'll use those two terms interchangeably. If I ever say list, I'm talking about an array list. We're going to say asteroids dot. So this is an accessor for an array list. And we're going to say add, which is a built-in function for array lists. And then we're going to say new asteroid. And this is the constructor. So instead of making each of our variables named, like we do before, like player has a name and stuff like that, we're actually making asteroids that don't have names because we don't care about their names. You can name them whatever you want, but theoretically, because they're not going to have names. So this way, we're going to get a bunch of asteroids on the screen. So instead of we're not going to be calling individual asteroids anymore. We're going to be looping through our list of asteroids to see what we need to do. So instead of, we're going to set up a loop here. So instead of calling each asteroid, we're going to set up our loop the same way. We're going to set I equal to 0. And we usually use I for loops because it means index. You'll also see me use J because sometimes I have 2 loops and I don't want to confuse which one is which. But usually we use I, J, K, stuff like that. That just are just index numbers while we loop through things. So we're gonna loop until I is, as long as I is less than the asteroids dot size. So the size function here is going to get how many asteroids are in my list. Okay, so we're going to loop through each asteroid in our list, and then we are going to call their update function. So to get the asteroid that we are looping through at the time, so this is going to go, like, let's say there's 5 asteroids. This is going to loop 5 times. So we have an index number each time. We're going to say asteroids.get I. So this is like saying, get me number 1 asteroid, get me number 2 asteroid, get me number 3 asteroid. And we're going to tell that specific asteroid to update. And then we're going to go to the next one, and then the next one, all the way until we get to the last asteroid, tell it to update, and then we'll break our loop. And in so doing, we're going to do this the same way. So I just copied that real quick because you're going to use a lot of the same code for the render. And we're going to paste it into our render function. So we're going to loop through the asteroids just the same, and we're going to get the asteroid, but instead of calling update, we're going to call render. And I believe that is all we have to do, and we should see a bunch of asteroids running on the screen now. Oh, nope, no pointer error. Fun, fun. We messed up. There we go. Close the program. Okay, so this is where we get to do a little hunting. Must have messed up something. Oh, we forgot to instantiate the array list. Hopefully you did not break your code. So, as with player, we have to instantiate our array list. So this is equal to a new asteroids is equal to a new array list. Yeah, list is capital. And then we have to say what type it is. Again, and a little greater than less than signs around it. And then that should do it. All right, let's try this again and see if we get the same error. Perfect. Now they're all moving around. One thing you will notice is that they are all spawning from the same spot. No bueno. So what we are going to do now is we are going to set up random locations for them to spawn. But one thing you might be thinking is, oh, if we set up random locations for them to spawn, won't they hit our player right away? Well, that's the good thing about this random function we're about to write, is that it excludes an area around the player. So we are going to set up a function under edge in the asteroid class that's called private void random position, or rand position. Open our curly brackets, and I wrote void. And in here, we are going to figure out which part of the screen the asteroid is going to get spawned on. So we're going to set up a Boolean called top, and that is going to be set to false originally, and a Boolean called left, and that is going to be set to false. So if top is false, that means bottom is, like, it's at the bottom of the screen, and if left is false, that means it's at the right side of the screen. So what we are going to do is we are going to set up 2 if statements to see which part of the screen we should draw this asteroid in. So we're going to say if floor, remember we got to floor that random because it gives us a float and we don't want to float. So we're going to say floor random, and we're going to go from 0 to 2 because that's going to give us a true or a false, right? And we're going to say if that's equal to 0, so about half the time this should be 0, we're going to set top equal to true. And so what we could do is we could set up an else and set top equal to false, but we already did that. So if this isn't true, top is already going to be equal to false. So we can just keep going, and then we'll do the same for the left-hand side. Random, 0 to 2. We'll say if that's equal to 0, we're going to set left equal to true. Okay, so now we have, if you think about the screen into 4 quadrants, we have 4 separate quadrants that we can look at as far as where we're going to be drawing these asteroids. So we need to set up 4 different if statements as far as where to draw this asteroid. So if we set the first one to top is true and we set left to true, so if both of these are true, then what's coming in here is going to execute. And this, the 2 ampersands, is how you combine things. So this is what we're saying. We're saying if top, the Boolean top, if that's set to true, and the Boolean left is set to true, then all this code is going to execute. So we're going to say position x equals random, and we'll pick a random number between 0 and this is where we're going to exclude the player. We're going to say the width of the screen divided by 2, and then we're going to subtract 100 pixels. So the position x is talking about left to right. So if we're on the left-hand side, we want the left half of the screen, but we're also going to take out 100 pixels. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting up a 100 pixel block in the middle of the screen where the player is, so that the player doesn't die right away. I think I missed a parenthesis. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing for position y. So I'm just going to copy that, change this to position y, random, and then instead of width, we're going to set height divided by 2 minus 100. Okay, perfect. We got 1 done. So then if one thing to make your code run faster is instead of just using if statements, you can use else if statements too. So what this is going to do is if I say else if, it's only going to run this else if the first statement was false. So else if the top is true and not left. This is the same as this exclamation point in front of left is the same thing as saying left is not equal to true. But instead of saying that, we can just put the exclamation point in front, and that means if top is true and left is false, we're going to run this code. So then we're going to do a similar thing. So I'm just going to copy this code, and then we can change it up. So we're going to say if position x, the top is going to be the same. So this first line where position x is, that's going to stay the same. Position y is going to change a little bit. We're going to do the height. We're just going to take out all of this in the random function. We're going to rewrite that. So what we want to do is we want to find the height divided by 2 plus 100 because we're on the other side, or we're on the oh shoot. Oh, made a mistake. I'm looking at the wrong thing. So this one, oh, that is the right thing. How is that possible? No, I'm looking at the wrong one. So Control Z that. This is going to stay the same. This one's going to change because we're looking from left to right. So this one is going to be the width divided by 2 plus 100 to the width of the screen. And that one is going to stay the same. Then we can write our next else if statement, and we're going to say if the top is false and left is true, and that is going to be our, why is this throwing me an error? Open. Got too many parentheses here. There we go. That should fix it. So make sure you check that code. Make sure your parentheses are in the right spots. Okay, so this one is going to be similar. We're just going to grab the top one because it's a good starting point. So the top refers to the Y position, so that's the one we're going to have to change. So in this one, we are going to do the height divided by 2 plus 100. And then we're going to set that to the height. Boom, that one's done. Then lastly, this is going to be an else because it's the last option, so we don't have to write else if. In the last option, we're going to take the false top and the false left, and that should work. Clean that up a little bit. Okay, so take a minute, make sure, pause the video right here, make sure that your function looks the same as this, and hopefully this is working right. So you didn't just pause the video and check, make sure it was working right. So then what we're going to need to do is, when instead of setting our position x and y right here, we are going to call our random position function. So what this is going to do is, instead of setting that position to where they're all emanating out of the same place, here, oh, I misspelled it down there. Position. Okay, if I misspelled random position, that should fix it. And as long as they're both named the same, it should work fine. Okay, so instead of, like I say, instead of setting the position to 100, 100, this should set the random position somewhere on the screen, but not close enough to the player, like 100 pixels away from the player. So if we go back to the game, oh, and the speed was kind of looking a little fast. Let's set that to 2 instead of 5, because I think they were just moving really fast. And there we go. So, if you would, grab me or Mr. Lavin. We can come check you off on getting this moving around. And I will see you in part 7. And make sure to save your code.